The comeback king, Magnus Carlsen, does it again. You can just never count the guy out. I did hear some pretty funny stuff recently, though, and you probably heard this as well. Magnus should quit. He's washed up. I don't know why anyone would think that. He's going below 2,800. I heard one master say that, and I said, you know, he just won the World Rapid and World Blitz. And he goes, oh. And I was like, yeah, I mean, let's slow down a little bit here. Remember that ratings are hyper stable at IM level and beyond. Actually, kind of funny story. This one grandmaster said, what if we just quadruple the K factor? What if every single game you can gain 50 points? And I said, well, do you think that would be reasonable if Kasparov was 3,100 and then suddenly 2,500? And he thinks about it a little bit and he goes, yeah, I guess that's not too reasonable. And he kind of reasoned his way out of it and said, yeah, I think this K factor of 10 for IM and above players makes a lot of sense. But if you're going to be 2850 plus, you have to be so stable. So every single time when this situation comes up, I just tell people, relax, Carlsen's not in terrible form. Someone told me something pretty funny about Carlsen's 2 defeats. They said, the guy can survive 2 defeats. Remember, Terminator didn't have any damage from a shooting and a stabbing. Pretty graphic. I guess I'm demonetized already on here. But good news, I do have the same sponsor as Djokovic, Lacoste. No, I'm just kidding. I wish I could be sponsored by them. But anyway, it's important to realize that we don't want to be too results-oriented. We want to kind of have a very calm and relaxed approach. And one thing I want to delve into here is I want to go into some of the games. And you'll see I don't really have any notes here. I'm just kind of, looking at the positions and drawing some reasonable conclusions. But if you look through the games, we're going to try to go through 6 games really quickly. Just say a couple of things about each game and draw some conclusions about kind of mental resilience, how Carlsen bounced back, how he's been so stable here for so long. I mean, the situation comes up, I would say about once a year, where someone says Carlsen's in terrible form. I tell everybody to calm down, and the same exact thing happens. He bounces back, but he's incredibly good after a loss. Now, in this case, he had 2 losses, which was uncharacteristic, but his play was still absolutely fantastic after that. So, I don't think he's going under 2,800 anytime soon. I don't believe he's washed up in any way. I don't believe he should quit. I think his games are incredibly fun to watch, and I think he's been doing a great job. And, it's hard to maintain this extremely high level of motivation for so long and still keep innovating and being fresh. But I will explain kind of the causes that led to his losses, why they're not that big of a cause for concern, and exactly why his wins were also kind of characteristic of him. So, realize that variance is a big part of chess. And it can easily happen that you have a couple of bad games, and under normal circumstances, maybe you would draw or even win one of those. And in particular, the second game that I'm going to show here, Carlsen simply missed an intermediate check, and had he played it, well, he most likely would have drawn the game, and there would have been no big news story about it. So it can often just be one single intermediate move that completely changes everything. So let me go through this Giri Carlsen game. I'm going to click through the opening. I am going to mention one point. Okay, so we have a typical Queen's Indian. Queen c2 is played. Bishop b7, bishop g2. Okay, the c5 pawn break. Yeah, d5, this is main line. Plays the pawn sack. So a big part of the compensation is straight down the d file. It's a bit hard for black to untangle without giving up a pawn. So bishop b7 is played, rook to d1, knight c6 all main line. You can't take the knight, of course, because of knight b4 with the fork. Queen f5, knight f6, e4. Okay, so click on the book button here. You can see g6, overwhelming main move. Now, you might say, well, why did Carlsen not play g6? Well, think about what happens. If Carlsen plays g6, plays out a whole bunch of theory, and it's just a known theoretical draw, well, what happens? Well, he loses rating. So Carlsen is a tremendous fighter, and yeah, it's easy to be critical of him losing the game, but just think about what happened. I mean, what you'll actually see here, yeah, he took a big risk. He played an interesting line. But the amusing thing about it is he did imbalance the game, and he did get an interesting game. Actually, probably what was most amusing to me, you look in here, and Carlsen actually played, I mean, I guess my face is in the way, but Carlsen actually played the white side of this, and he probably realized, hey, this is actually not so simple. So that is a valuable takeaway. If somebody plays a really challenging line against you, and you realize it's not easy to get anything with white, you may play it as black if you play the same line. So they go into the ending. Carlsen goes queen d7. We are still in known theory. There's a Polgar game here, of course the Carlsen game. Bishop f6. So we're still in theory, actually. Rook e1 check, king f8. Still 4 games here. Knight c3, knight b4. Knight e5. Okay. So this was a very interesting move. Very interesting move, playing against the undefended d7 knight and the bishop on b7. So what Carlsen does here is he simply takes. Bishop takes b7 and plays rook to d8, attacking the d6 pawn. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting, because that d-pawn is potentially quite strong. If that pawn becomes too strong, you're going to have problems. So Carlsen goes knight c4, provoking the pawn to advance forward. d7, knight c2, hitting the rook with tempo. Rook b1. All of this looks very good so far. All of this looks very, very reasonable. Can't really criticize anything that he's done so far. All looks quite sound. But we do have to figure out, how are we going to develop? How are we going to bring out our pieces? And, perhaps most importantly right away, how are we going to deal with that d7 pawn? Because bishop c8 might be an idea. There might also be other possibilities of pushing things forward. But you do have to be pretty careful here. Now, this is where kind of people draw too strong of a conclusion based on, nothing really that's that big of a deal. So Carlsen played knight d4 now. And one of the reasons this turned out to be a mistake is after the move b4, think about the stability of the knight right here. If this knight moves out of the way, well, you know what? Suddenly we get bishop a3 ideas. And of course, I don't know exactly what Carlsen was thinking, but it is a little difficult to see the bishop coming to a3, to just sort of envision that right here. So I think that just kind of wasn't something he thought about at all. It's a pretty deep x-ray, so you have to see through your b-pawn, and you have to consider both of the knights being out of the way. So what this actually ties into as well is there was a Dvoretsky article that I studied a long time ago where he was talking about leaving annoying pieces in the opponent's camp when they're not able to actually trap them. That's a very interesting thought, because a lot of the time you'll have your queen in the opponent's camp, maybe a knight, and you'll think, I better get out of dodge, I better get out of the way. But you know what? The knight on c2 is actually quite useful. And later, it can come to d4 if we need to. So anytime it needs to go there, we can. And so it would be better to see if we can provoke them to actually make us do that. So what we should do instead is we should go knight e5 right away. This is a much better line. And here we will be able to actually surround that pawn. So this is quite interesting. For example, let's say we go knight e5. They go here. Now I can go knight d4. Now I'm threatening this, and the bishop will be hanging. So that's a crucial tempo that we can get there. So had Carlsen played this, you know what? The game very likely would have headed towards a draw. Nobody would have suspected anything. Everything would have seemed, par for the course. So draw for Carlsen with black. There is another interesting point here. There was a point made by Grandmaster Kevin Go where he said, note the level of risk that Carlsen takes. So first of all, it was the opening choice. He doesn't want to just give away rating points in the opening, so he plays something more fresh. And he did get an unbalanced position. But kind of on top of that, he continued to play this, almost in the sharpest way possible. And, he tried to give himself some chances. But unfortunately, b4 came in, and that was a very powerful move. And here's one of the other points. Let's say take, and knight to d6. Well, look at the problems with the knights right here. Game over, right? So you can't go c takes b4, so you just have these tremendous problems. So what happened here is he just played rook takes d7. Again, probably just knight to d7. But one very, very important point here. The reason you don't want the rook on d7 is because you want the knight here to be able to guard c5. c5 is a key focal point that is attacked. So there's another thing which is very easy to miss in this. So bishop d5 chased the unstable knight away. But on top of all of this, notice how Carlsen's king gets attacked in the endgame. That's often a concept people tend to not think about. Take bishop a3, and it was probably either around here or a few moves prior where Carlsen started to think, uh-oh, after bishop takes c5, there's a fatal pin. There is a pin that is so strong and is going to be decisive, and I can't really get out of it. So he tried to sack a pawn to get out of it, but his pieces were too tangled up. So here he's completely losing. So bishop takes d4 was played, hitting the knight. Knight e6, bishop b4, and here you can see the power of the fatal pin. A lot of people haven't even heard of fatal pin as a concept. Very, very important. Very, very important. There are entire games like this one that are won just due to a fatal pin. So it's the kind of thing where, all else equal, you give yourself a few moves to unravel and the game's equal, but not here. So Carlsen tried to sack a pawn to break out of the fatal pin. Take rook c8, bringing in his worst placed piece, knight a4, and now he's pinned. Now he's in another pin. Oh boy. So bishop e5, okay, check, king f6, and now Giri interfered with all of this, and now the game ended basically directly. And once again, we have a decisive pin. So here, bishop a5, let's say this is played, and yeah. The game is going to be over. So pretty incredible, but really the important thing from my perspective is don't read too much into this. Honestly, really what happened was he very simply played the wrong move on move 22. Had he played knight e5, gobbled up the d7 pawn, gobbled up really the most dangerous thing he has to worry about in the position, he probably would have drawn the game, and people would have said, oh, well, Carlsen's in good form. Then you play one bad move, miss an x-ray, and people say you're in terrible form. So as I would often say, I would tell people to reserve judgment. And what somebody else said is, well, you might want to wait until the end of the tournament. You might want to wait until you see all the games and then make a judgment based on everything. And that's often what you should do in your own games. You should judge your own tournament play based on many games. All right, so let's go to the second game where Carlsen played white against Abdusattorov, who's in first place. I'll skip over the opening. Pretty good line by Abdusattorov. I tweeted that I quite liked his opening play. It was pretty sound. So bishop b5 by Carlsen. Take queen c7. Notice how black plays without any weaknesses. So d4. Okay, what does he do? Just simplifies. Take. Bishop d7. Very clean. Super clean with black. No weaknesses whatsoever. Well done. Well done. So I thought this was going to be very hard for Carlsen to really do anything with. I thought he might do something on the c file. Bishop f6, that was a little bit of a surprise. Carlsen plays bishop a3. Okay, could have played rook b1, plays bishop a3. He sacks the exchange, and somebody asked me, they said, well, what's Carlsen's compensation here? I said, well, notice that he does have the bishop pair. When you have the bishop pair, the most important minor piece on the board is the unopposed bishop. The unopposed bishop on a3 is actually quite good. The black king is not that well placed, plus g7 is loose. So what he did in the game was Abdusattorov played king b8, Carlsen took, rook h g8 was played here. Now, one thing kind of relating to the Dvoretsky content I had studied before, in this case, taking an extra pawn might actually make his defense easier. For example, let's say I play this. Let's say bishop to g4 is played. Well, the interesting thing from Carlsen's perspective, I don't know, maybe I can play bishop e2 here. Say I go bishop e2, and then rook h8, and then the queen comes back. Take, king f1. We're actually quite safe. So In this case, I don't think Carlsen would have lost. I don't think he would have had any special problems here. But he went queen b2, and I would warn you against playing too passively in cases of attack and defense with opposite side castling, because he may have missed what happened. Bishop g4. And this is actually kind of funny. If bishop takes c6, queen takes c6, back rank weakness. So of course he can't take and get mated on the back rank. So there was that issue. So he played knight e1. And now he probably didn't miss that, but I mean, it could also be that he looked at this structure and he said, you know what, okay, I have 5 pawns, he has 4. I have the bishop pair, you know, with stubborn defense, I should be able to put up a tough defense. Let me skip to the crucial point. I mean, you could go really deep into the analysis of this game. I think Carlsen did a pretty good job. Just kind of notice what he did. All right, so he brings his queen over. He goes after the h7 pawn. Okay, that's good. Plays bishop b2. Okay. Okay, so no more bishop pair. But again, if you want to assess it from the perspective of someone in horrendous form who is about to lose 50 plus rating points, you can't really draw that kind of connection to the play that we're looking at here. He actually played pretty well. So he goes knight f3, queen takes a2, bishop f6, hitting the rook, check. Okay, so now a key thing for Carlsen is he wants to get his pass pawn in motion. So he has 4 versus 1 over here. Abdusattorov has 2 versus 0 on the queen side. Would like to get in h4 somewhere. He plays knight d4. Okay, I think he could have played h4 earlier, but he wants to kind of keep it safe. Maybe get a few exchanges in. So queen d6, f4. Okay, he's hitting the rook while the bishop is being hit. Take, 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 g3. And then he takes on d4. Okay, so black is now up a pawn here, and Carlsen pushes his h-pawn forward. a4, queen a2. So an interesting queen endgame. And it really wouldn't be fair to criticize Carlsen here. You know, sometimes after these endgames, people say, oh, well, you know, Carlsen should have picked up a queen endgame book. But no, you can't really say that. He did a pretty good job. Again, if he had just thrown in one intermediate check, he would have drawn the game, and people would have said, well, it was a great defense by Carlsen. So just keep that in mind when you judge these kinds of things. My student here suggested the move queen h4. That is a good move. That is a good move. Notice that if take, the king is not within the square of the pawn, so the h-pawn will queen. So queen h4 is a nice suggestion. Play king g1, okay. Queen f3, and it's right here. It's right here where you don't want to allow black to be able to play a very quick transfer of the queen. He plays this and then goes b5, and then the b pawn is going to be too strong. So what he should do here is go queen e8 check. Prophylaxis against queen e2 check and queen e5. Notice, and this is just kind of a general principle in queen endings, just how powerful a perfectly centralized queen can be in dominating the opponent's queen. So had he played queen e8 check, of course, I know this is a draw. You can see it's a table-based draw. So here, and I thought the simplest move is just king h2, exactly as he was going for in the game. But here's the problem. He's not going to be able to push the b-pawn. First of all, I'm guarding the square. But second of all of these perpetual check possibilities. So had Carlsen played queen e8 check, that singular intermediate move, he would have drawn the game. And now just kind of keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. He lost the game to Giri had he closely followed the Dvoretsky principle and just attacked the most dangerous thing that the opponent had, their d7 pawn, probably would have drawn. Had he gotten this intermediate check, he would have drawn as well. So we're not really dealing with typical cases of him either A, having obvious bad form, or B, even really getting outplayed in that sense. So anyway, queen e2 check, king g1. Beautiful technique, by the way, by Abdusattorov. Notice how, just for the most part, he's just pushing his pawn. He's finding a safe way to push his pawn. So there's b5, g4 is played. Okay, so Carlsen wants to get a position where there's only the b pawn, and maybe he can hope to try to get perpetual check. But his king is cut off on the e-file, so he is losing. King b6, queen g8, b4. And here the problem is the king can just run forward. So he just goes king b5. as I said, excellent play here. Excellent play here. There goes b3. Yeah, the king just runs forward. Not much you can do. You can block with the queen very soon. So here, king d1. Okay, now you're not going to check because there's this or this. So queen h8, check, and Carlsen resigned. But again, the key thing is examine the details of the game and think about exactly why he lost. In the first game that we looked at, the reason why Carlsen lost, okay, it wasn't something you like to see, but it really wasn't a big deal. I mean, yeah, had he played knight e5 instead, everything would have looked fine. Had he thrown in an intermediate check, everything would have looked fine. So I do want to show one thing. The 2018 World Championship match, the first decisive game in the rapid games, was something that Carlsen did himself. So, I mean, if somebody wants to say, oh, yeah, Carlsen really needs to improve on his intermediate checks, well, he stayed world champion because of an intermediate check. So this was from Carlsen Caruana, game 13 of the 2018 match. And what should have been played here is check. This check, the intermediate check for Caruana, should have been thrown in, and then he would have been able to draw. But he played king takes e4, and then check, take, and with rook g5 coming, the two connected passed pawns here beat the single pawn on the other side. So it was just because the king was decoyed or drawn into f5, and then rook g5 kind of sealed the deal here. So again, just kind of make sure that the criticisms are reasonable and rational and that there's real evidence for it. But the thing that I saw when I saw these games is, all right, yeah, something went wrong for Carlsen, but not a terrible deal. Yeah, it shouldn't happen 2 games in a row. But Carlsen is incredibly good at bouncing back. So here's the end of this World Championship game. Yeah, and then Caruana resigned. Now let's take a look at the wins. Let's take a look at the wins because the comeback king, or as I might say, the comeback kid, did not let down. By the way, the song "Comeback Kid" by Against the Current, fantastic song. You should look that up on YouTube. That's an incredible song. All right. So Magnus Carlsen, Richard Rapport. I do actually have a win against Richard Rapport. I played in many tournaments with him, and we had some tough fights. I had games with him up until he was 2,600, and he taught me a lot of valuable lessons. I had to dig deep into the games. I always wanted to understand what exactly was Richard trying to do in those games against me. And of course, tons of players I know Richard very, very well and have insights into the way he thinks. So let's see what Carlsen did here. Okay, e4, knight f3, knight f6. All right, we have a Petrov. Goes for knight d3. Okay, Carlsen has played this before. Take, queen e2, queen e7. A lot of people underestimate this because it's very symmetrical, but there are some dangers. Okay, c6, f3, chases away the strong centralized piece. Okay, Carlsen goes d4. Looks good. Bishop f5. Okay, logical developing move by Rapport. c4, defending the pawn. h5, okay, he stabilizes the bishop. That all looks good. Knight c3, knight a6, king f2. King f2 is a nice little touch. So he's kind of probing Rapport to take on e2. Now, I think the simplest thing to do here is just go take, knight b4. There doesn't really seem to be a lot of danger. I mean, if you just kind of look at the pawns here, if you think about it from the perspective of rotating a concept in your mind's eye, think about how you would adapt this pawn structure for white. It's not easy. Not easy to play g4. It's not easy to get a good pawn break on the queen side. So it's really not easy to do anything spectacular. So this just leads to a very stable and safe position. So now queen d1 is played. Okay. Knight to d3. Now the danger here is that black's king might be very easy to attack over here on the queen side. I mean, for example, b4, b5 just kind of rips open the king position right away. So the main consideration when castling queenside in this type of a position is how easy is it for the opponent to open up my king. Now, Rapport had a really interesting idea, and here I want to warn you against something. If you see computer analysis, even very, very deep computer analysis that doesn't seem believable or right, make moves. Make more moves and make sure it's really, really clear to you. So right here, c5. He could also go bishop takes d3 here. He went for knight takes. Bishop takes knight e4 check. I saw analysis here said from depth 71 that said that black is able to draw here. I mean, that's really, really difficult to say as a human player, because Carlsen is also a king, well, not only in chess, but skill-wise, he's a king of playing with a piece against 3 pawns, for example. He's an incredibly good player at converting those types of advantages. So he goes bishop e3. All right, he has pretty good alignment of his pieces. He's going rook f1. He's going king g1. Did a good job. Also, I like the fact that these are such well-played games that I don't have to comment on everything because the play is so high quality. But, I mean, here's the thing. When you take a look at something like this, even if at depth 71 the computer says that black can draw, play out some lines and convince yourself. Because remember, the computer is just a tool to help you understand things. And if it's not helping you understand things, well, it's not performing its duty. So clearly what should have been played here is bishop takes d4 should have been played, take, and then queen c1. And now you can go king g1 and queen e3. And it does seem really, really risky in general for Rapport. And like I said, I think this is one of those kind of funny cases where the computer says equal at depth 71 and then it says plus equal at depth 80. So just because it's high depth doesn't mean you can automatically trust it. You should always play things out for clarity. So that's a good, just simple lesson about using engines. Okay, this move looked bad though. So now he's not getting that pawn. That d4 pawn was crucial. So he sacks here. Uh-oh, that's not good. He's down another piece. Check, king f1, the king runs away. Now I was watching this game and I thought, I wonder if Carlsen's going to be nervous in the defense. Here's another kind of useful lesson. He takes the pawn on f7. What does he do? Just kind of blocks. Just goes bishop c4, queen to b3, and guess what? The f-file is blocked. And notice, well, he's up 2 pieces for only 2 pawns. So when you're up that much material, you can play a defensive sacrifice. So bishop c4, there we go. High-level defensive strategy, blocking the king. Excellent stuff. King f2, take, rook f8. So there we go, queen b3. He has successfully blocked. Okay, but now he only has a queen and rook. He's not going to do well here. I liked what Carlsen did. He just kind of kept his king as safe as possible. I was thinking maybe like check, maybe go here, check, king h2. I thought something like that's pretty nice, pretty simple. But he made it even more simple. He just went king e2, check, king here, check, take, knight e2. And how does he make it even more simple for himself? Just trades the queens off, queen h3. Take, boom, there we go. Rook g3, the e-pawn is falling, and Rapport resigned. You know, I do feel some sympathy for Rapport. Quite like him as a player. It's really, really cool to see him at the top. I was actually glad, you know what? This is about comeback kids, comeback kings. Who else was a comeback king? Rapport. Came back in the tournament, and now he's doing well. So, you know, credit to Richard. Great job. Great job. All right, let's take a look at the Caruana game against Carlsen. Let me flip the board, look at it from the black side. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. Pretty normal Rai Lopez stuff. Bishop e7, b5. Okay, so he plays the martial move order. a4, b4. Carlsen has played a lot of stuff in these types of positions. You'll remember from the World Championship match against Nepo. Very, very hard to prove anything for white in these kinds of positions. a5, yeah, that's a critical line. c3, yeah, after rook b8, the thing I always found the most annoying for white is you always have to look out for rook b5 and rook takes a5. He plays h3. Okay, I've also seen this move, bishop c4, bishop g4. I've seen that before. H3, h6, d4. Now, I was curious, what's Carlsen going to do here? He simply goes take, take. Okay, take. Knight takes. He could take. He could take. I thought it's reasonable to perhaps take and go d5. That seems pretty reasonable, just getting the central break. But he played bishop d7. I like that. I like that move, bishop d7. Notice what he's doing. He's leaving the opponent with two weaknesses. So just kind of makes things maybe practically a little bit more difficult, and it keeps more tension. Okay, bishop f4, knight e5. Now, notice what Carlsen does. Just improves his worst place piece. All right, the rook's not doing anything. Let's bring it in. Boom, boom. There we go. Rook e8, bishop f8. Okay, bishop f8. Now, there was a lot of criticism here over Caruana's play. Now, here's the thing. He wanted to challenge Black's unstable pieces. He wanted to go boom, boom, f4, e5, break, break, hit away the unstable piece and break. Now, one of the risks is he will isolate his e-pawn, so it is inherently risky. But try to envision this. So I understand why he did it. f4, knight c6, and I don't even think it was bad. e5, okay, take, take. Now, here's what I think was missed by Caruana. Somebody asked me, do I think all of this was preparation by Carlsen? I mean, I don't know how much credit you want to give him here. I mean, it's move 21 for Black after he plays knight takes d4. And he'd been thinking, so I really don't think this was preparation. I just think it was a great x-ray. It was a beautiful, beautiful x-ray. Take, take, bishop c6. Now, let me draw the arrows so you can see the point, so you can see the depth. So he goes bishop c6 with his piece hanging. What's the idea? Take, 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 and then rook takes b3, decoying the queen, which has to defend the rook on a1. Boom, the queen comes in, double attack. That's the nasty x-ray right there. That's a really, really gross x-ray. And I've had this conversation with numerous grandmasters before, even who wrote books on tactics. And I've said, well, what's the hardest tactic in chess? And they'll think I'm kind of throwing out a riddle or a brain teaser, and I'll say x-rays. You literally have to see through pieces. I mean, almost by definition, it's the hardest kind of tactic. And they kind of sit there and go, I guess you're right. And it just kind of goes to show that chess is such a deep game that I can be an international master, tell a grandmaster something about a game that he spent 20,000 hours on or more, and he'll think about it and go, you know what? Never thought about that. Good point. Good point. All right, back to the game. Carlsen, bishop c6, the X-ray comeback king. The X-ray comeback kid. So he kind of collapsed here. Now, let me show the line. Take, take, take. Rook takes b3. Decoy of the overloaded queen. Bang. There we go. Winning position. Beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. So, boom, boom, and decisive advantage for Carlsen. So, just an awesome calculation. And again, take a look at the arrows and tell me X-rays aren't the hardest tactic in chess. You look at this and you go, okay, I'm swayed. You've persuaded me. I get, okay, hardest tactic in chess. You win. Okay. All right. So what should he play here? I was going to say just something like rook f1. Just break the pin. Nothing fancy. Now, the nastiness is still here. Queen d5. G2 focal point right here. G2, how are you going to guard it? Okay, rook e2, rook b4. But you know what? We're still in X-ray city. I like to joke with one of my students. We all deserve radiology degrees for how much we see, how many X-rays we see. So, it'd be nice if medical school would give it to us. But, you can't get everything you want. All right, so if e takes f6, we simply go boom, boom, take, and once again, the power there. The power created from bishop to c6. Phenomenal, phenomenal. So, d4 is just too weak. Once d4 falls, white's in big, big trouble. So Carlsen just went for simplicity. I liked rook d2 as well. You know, take, I'm threatening mate. That looked pretty simple. But he just went knight e4. I can't really criticize what Carlsen did here. It was so smooth. So he's up a pawn. Notice his extra pawn is a passed pawn, which he can push. Plus he has the bishop pair. Notice what he does. All right, standard strategy. Lets his pile up on the isolated pawn. All right, Caruana tried this. Didn't really work. Take, rook c5, bishop d5. Resigns. Okay, why does he resign? Take, bishop b4. We gobble up the isolated pawn. 2 pawns up. Game over. We just roll the pawns up the board. That's the end of the game. So, great stuff by Carlsen. I mean, I think you can see in the game against Rapport and this game against Caruana, he was so accurate. He was so incredibly accurate. And the end game against Caruana in the 2018 World Championship. So, you know, had he drawn the Abdusattorov game, you know, I think it totally changes perception. So that's why you don't want to be so results-oriented, because you can see from this breakdown, I mean, Carlsen's pretty phenomenal. So I do have a video called How to Beat Magnus Carlsen going through his losses, but, you know, quite clearly that was a hard video to make and there wasn't a whole lot to put in there. But, you know, this video does shine a light on the way that he lost. So he did kind of miss one move in an endgame and get a little startled in an unconventional middle game. Now let's take a look at Carlsen's win today, which was extremely impressive too. All right, so he played Maghsoodloo, and he had never beaten Maghsoodloo in a classical game. All right, so we get a Queen's Gambit declined, exchange variation. By the way, it's super solid, but it's not that easy to, you know, outplay somebody as black in a standard QGD exchange. Okay, so he goes bishop g4. Let me see how many games. Wow, only one game in the database. Whoa. I did not even realize that. Like I told you, I didn't have any notes on this, so I'm just kind of seeing some of this essentially for the first time. But, you know, a lot of what you're doing when you're analyzing games is just using simple common sense. You know, you're kind of working backwards from the last mistake, being like, okay, what was the key weakness and how do we avoid that weakness? What was the key central problem and how do we avoid that? And, you know, that's often how game analysis works intelligently. Okay, bishop g4, check, c6, bishop d3. Okay, so Carlsen just simply castles, h3, bishop h5. Okay, so pretty reasonable play by Maghsoodloo. I didn't think it was crazy or anything. Didn't really strike me as insane. I thought he was, I mean, he's playing pretty creatively here. Now, he's going to go all in on g4 to try to win the pawn. Okay, so Carlsen goes c5. He plays the conventional chess strategy of countering a flank attack with an attack in the center. Makes sense, specifically with a central pawn break. Okay, g4, there we go. Take, bishop g6, take. Aha, he throws in this move to hit the undefended piece. Clever. Okay, check. Rook f7, take. Okay, he gets the piece back. Knight f3, queen f6. Another really nice move by Carlsen. You have to be very accurate here. Because you're very likely going to have to give something back. I mean, as I said before, a lot of what you do defensively in different positions is say, okay, maybe something went wrong and maybe I give up a pawn. Also, if the opponent took some positional liberties, that can be another reason why you might be able to sack a pawn. Okay, take, knight c6. All right, we're hitting the d4 pawn here. Rook d1. Check. Yeah. All right. Doesn't seem that crazy at the moment. Knight e3. He's doing a decent job with the knights. The only thing white really has to pay attention to here is to not lose one of the pawns. Advancing the passed pawn makes a whole lot of sense. So, looked like Maghsoodloo played pretty well here. He goes d5. All right, I can't really criticize that. He goes d6, check. take. Okay. And now we take the pawn. But that's really not the end of the story here, because I mean, we have a good deal of flexibility. We have a good deal of flexibility here. I mean, just sort of notice the fact that Carlsen sacked a pawn, gave the opponent material. He won his pawn back. But conceptually, this isn't really that bad for Maghsoodloo here. So my suggestion was perhaps here you can just go d7, and then if rook f8, you can go rook h5. And then from here, at the very least, I can just hold the pawn. And if if black tries to run over and attack the pawn, well, it's almost definitely just gonna be some kind of repetition, or they'll lose another pawn. They'll trade off pawns. So rook d5, okay. Rook d7. Now the key here, and this is just a good general lesson. If you're playing with white, and after the opening something has gone slightly wrong, try to have a bailout strategy in mind. That's good metagame strategy. You'll save so many games that way. And that's one of the great strengths of Carlsen. A lot of the time he will actually mess something up with white and perfectly simplify into a drawn endgame and not shed points. But here's another thing. Let's say you're thinking to yourself, well, what about these other players that are 27-20 who have lost 40 points in a short period of time? What about somebody like that? Well, keep in mind, the reason why Carlsen is so high rated is because of how stable he is. He doesn't do that the way that even some players in the top 10 have. So you have to keep all of that in mind, and also decide, do you want to call him the comeback king, the comeback kid, none of the above? You can suggest what names you think are good. But what I suggest in this position is, I believe the best way to bail out, just, try to challenge the rook. Go rook c1, rook c7. That looks like a good way to play. And, black would be forced to kind of go on the defensive a little bit. But instead, rook f1 was played. To me, that was a strange move. I didn't quite understand what he was going for with that. Because what's going on in the file? Why not fight for the strength of your passed pawn? That kind of baffled me. And at this point, once Carlsen took that pawn, and my first reaction was, I think Magnus is going to win this one. Bishop f6, rook b4. Okay, so now he just runs the king up, and the king is perfectly safe and stable here. Notice that the bishop's doing a good job of controlling the knight. King e6. Yeah, in particular, once I saw rook b4, I said, yep, Carlsen sees it. He's got ideas of rook b2. He's got ideas of bringing the king up. Okay, not right away because of knight e5, but you get my point. So I saw rook b4, and my first reaction was, yep, looks like Magnus is going to take this one home. So he played rook a4. Yeah, good move. Okay, he decoys away the defender. Take. Alrighty, 2 pawns up. Now we get to see some fantastic technique by Carlsen. King d5, take. Okay, he does have 3 isolated pawns, but he's got it under control. Check, king b3, king a4. Now he's just trying to get the b pawn in motion. There he goes. Notice the king once again being cut off. That was a key factor in Carlsen's loss to Abdusattorov, with the king being cut off there by the queen on the e-file, queen on e5. King a4, all right, take, and once again cutting him off. So Carlsen does his magic, push, there we go. And he was potentially going to build a bridge and end this thing. Just went rook d5, and that was it. So phenomenal stuff. Boom, game over. Great stuff by Carlsen. I mean, my general kind of simple summary of what we saw here was Carlsen took a risk against Giri. And one point I forgot to mention is that Giri hadn't beaten him in over 10 years. And so Carlsen was thinking, hey, this is a guy I can take some risks against because he hasn't done well against me. And so, like, it's the exact opposite of, you might have heard somebody say, oh, Carlsen does terribly against Giri. That's what people said more than 10 years ago when Carlsen did lose a game to Giri, but it's been so long. I do think that contributed a little bit to Carlsen taking more risk. And, Carlsen wanted to bounce back against Abdusattorov, sacked the exchange soundly. It wasn't a bad sack. I heard people saying, oh, it's a crazy sack. Why is he doing that? A reasonable sacrifice. I mean, this is high-level 2850 chess. There was nothing wrong with that. So I don't know why people were saying that. Again, a lot of the time just not really following the games that closely. Just going, well, this is crazy. But nah, it wasn't crazy. It was pretty normal. So anyway, those were causes of the losses. The losses didn't really lead me to have any cause for concern. Again, what would have? Well, if Carlsen made some really simple blunder in both games, or, like missing a fatal pin is one of the more subtle things to mess up. It's like if you have somebody who misses a deep fatal pin, you go, how could you? How could you miss that? It's more like, all right, that was deep. That was deep. Let's be honest, that was deep. So I don't really think there was that much to worry about. I'm sure Carlsen realized during the game, I missed perhaps the fatal pin. And this is exactly why clear language is so helpful. You use that very clear language and you understand the game. You see this game later on, you're like, oh, that's a fatal pin game. Oh, he missed an X-ray. And suddenly, an extremely complicated and strange and obscure game otherwise, now is actually very clear and easy to understand because you very clearly classified it. So that's why it's so important. People always ask me, oh, why do you care so much about the language? Well, now you can understand a really complex game in a few words. And when you think of those terms, you go, yeah, Carlsen missed the X-ray. Yeah, the fatal pin. So much more clear. So much more clear. And, so what we saw after those two losses is we saw a comeback king. And he won 3 out of 4. He won, and had a draw in the middle there, but, came back and, he won 2, drew, and then won this 4th game. But also keep in mind what he did. Keep in mind the level of difficulty. He beat Rapport into Petrov in a line which is by many considered the most drawish line in all of chess, and he won with a brilliant king f2 idea, keeping the queens on, and then subtle defense and winning by blocking his king. Again, high-level defensive strategy, blocking the king with a piece. Notice the concepts. And yeah, the Caruana game, perfect prep, perfect play. It looked like basically the kind of play that Carlsen exhibited in World Championship matches against Caruana, against Nepo. Super high-class stuff. Caught him with a very nasty X-ray, again, 2850 plus level chess, superb stuff. So the way he beat Rapport and the way he beat Caruana were just really high level. And then the way he beat Maghsoodloo was just really impressive too. He set problems for his opponent. He played an unusual line. He got him into unfamiliar territory. That was a quote from Caruana. He said the easiest way to outplay people is to get them into unfamiliar territory. Pretty good quote. Kind of hard to disagree with Caruana there. And that's what Carlsen did here against Maghsoodloo in that game from today. So super impressive stuff. 2 wins as black and 1 win as white in arguably the most drawish line in chess. So you gotta give Carlsen the credit. This is a comeback king. This is a comeback kid. So I want to just quickly summarize some main lessons you can take away from what we saw here. So one of them is don't be super results oriented with, a couple of results, a couple losses here. Now, if Carlsen lost 5 in a row, then I would say, okay, this is something very unusual, especially if the games indicated something really went wrong. So lesson 1, let's not be so results oriented. Let's look into the details and slow it down, be more calm, be more reasonable. Okay, point number 2 if you don't understand a computer evaluation and it just doesn't seem believable to you, play out some variations from the computer. And if it suddenly changes, well, you were probably right. I will also say that X-rays are extremely hard tactics, even for guys of Caruana's tremendous skill level. And a couple more points I want to bring up. I do want to bring up that pieces in deep positions in the opponent's camp can be really effective if they're not possible to be trapped. And that's a lesson from the Giri game, but also the Abdusattorov game with Carlsen's queen. That's a really interesting lesson. I only saw Dvoretsky teach that. I never really saw anybody else bring that up, but that's a good one. And the last point I want to bring up here, the last lesson from this game, have a bailout strategy in mind if things go wrong as white. Things go terribly wrong. You want to be able to bail out. You want to be able to save those points as white. And if you can get those extra points from having a draw instead of a loss in tons of games as white where you successfully bailed out, well, guess what? You might be saving 50 rating points a year. Carlsen is incredibly good at bailing out as white. And that's one thing, when people talk about all these different lessons they learned from Carlsen's game, or games, but from Carlsen's play, nobody really brings up. He's very, very good at not losing as white when things go wrong. But guess what else he's good at? He's very good at being a comeback king.